was silent, a sharp contrast to its usual riot of lights and music. I lay curled on a makeshift bed of old cushions in the dim storage room, surrounded by the stale scent of spilled drinks and the distant echo of music long faded. Shadows stretched across the walls, whispering the kinds of secrets only silence could keep alive. Secrets, I murmured to myself, unsure if I was responding to the echo or my own thoughts. Something about tonight felt different, not just unusual but charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I had missed the last bus home after a long shift and ended up here, locked inside this cluttered little space. My heart beat faster, not from fear exactly, but from the wild thrill of the unknown. There's something strange about being somewhere you're not supposed to be, especially in the dead of night. Then, the silence cracked open. A burst of laughter, careless and raw, followed by the uneven thud of footsteps. My whole body tensed. 3 young men stumbled into the room, their cheeks flushed with alcohol, eyes sparkling with mischief. For a brief second, none of us moved. What could possibly happen in a locked storage room at this hour? My name is Adele. I'm 57, and if you think that means I've lived a quiet life, you'd be wrong. I've been married to Frank for over 30 years. Our relationship has long since settled into the kind of routine that feels safe, but not always alive. I work as a cleaner at the Velvet Lounge, a nightclub that thrums with energy and lights, every night. It's not glamorous work, but it keeps me close to the thrum of life, even if I only witness it from behind a mop or broom. Tonight was supposed to be like any other. Finish my shift, catch the bus, go home. But the hours had stretched too long, and the last bus came and went without me. With no other choice, I decided to spend the night in the storage room, a cramped, chaotic little space stuffed with cleaning supplies, broken decorations, and leftover crates of alcohol. I built a bed from discarded cushions and told myself it would be fine. One night, just one. Still, unease sat heavily on my chest. The club's usual roar had been replaced by an unnatural stillness. The air clung to my skin, stale, scented with old liquor and the perfume of memories. Even the walls seemed to lean in, lined with shelves full of forgotten things, like they were keeping watch. I tried to settle in, thinking back on the day. Snatches of conversation, strained laughter, brief moments of connection that vanished as quickly as they came, but the silence grew thicker, wrapping around me like fog. Then came a sound, barely audible, but enough to make my breath catch. A soft rustle, the sigh of fabric perhaps, or someone exhaling in the dark. I froze. Was it just the old building, shifting with the night air? Or was someone, or something, in here with me? The room was nearly pitch black. Only a thin sliver of moonlight snuck in through the high, narrow window. I strained to listen, my ears aching with the effort. Nothing, yet the dread stayed. A chill traced my spine. Not from cold, but that primal sensation of being watched. I sat up, eyes darting toward every shadow. My fingers groped blindly until they found something cool and glassy. A champagne bottle, long forgotten. The touch was oddly comforting, grounding me in something real. I leaned back again, but sleep was far away. My mind wandered to Frank, to the safe, worn patterns of our life. We'd built something steady, dependable, but I couldn't help wondering if we'd lost something in the process. That spark, that danger. In this tiny, locked room, surrounded by silence and dust, the unknown pressed in from every angle, and I realized how long it had been since I felt its weight. The night dragged on, and the stillness grew more oppressive. Each second stretched into hours. I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that something was coming. Something that would not allow me to walk away unchanged. Then, laughter again. loud and close this time. Footsteps shuffled outside. The door, and I jolted upright. The door creaked open. Harsh fluorescent light spilled in, blinding after so much darkness. 3 young men stumbled in, laughing too loudly, their energy chaotic and unpredictable. I blinked, disoriented. I recognized them, regulars at the club. Leo, tall, lean, always with a smug grin. Seth, broad-shouldered and brash, his laugh echoing off the walls. And Rowan, quieter, watchful, with eyes that seemed to see too much. They froze when they saw me, blinking like they'd stepped into a dream they didn't expect. Their expressions shifted, surprise giving way to curiosity, and something else I couldn't name yet. I sat up straighter, every sense on high alert. Whatever was about to unfold, I knew one thing for sure. This night wasn't done with me yet. Hey, didn't know we had company? Leo slurred, his voice bouncing slightly off the narrow walls. The light from the hallway cast a crooked shadow across his face, one eye nearly lost in darkness, the other gleaming with curiosity. I opened my mouth to explain, to offer some harmless explanation for my presence. But Seth, holding a half-empty bottle like an offering, cut me off. Join us. It's still early. He grinned, eyes bright with mischief. And maybe something else I couldn't name. I hesitated for a breath too long, then nodded. Somehow, the idea of being alone in the dark with my thoughts felt more dangerous than staying with them. I accepted the bottle with trembling fingers, took a sip, and settled into their laughter. The night loosened. The alcohol smoothed the sharp edges of conversation, and soon I was laughing with them, genuinely, the sound surprising even me. I hadn't felt that kind of reckless lightness in years. Their stories were wild and half-true, stitched together with drunken bravado. But in their company, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Then, almost imperceptibly, the mood shifted. Leo leaned in, closer than before, his speech slurring further as he locked eyes with me. "You know, Elaine," he said, my name lingering on his tongue like a secret. "You're not like the usual crowd here." The warmth in his breath hit me, whiskey and something softer, more dangerous. Seth followed with a low chuckle. "Yeah, there's something about you. Something magnetic." His hand brushed against mine. It was brief, almost casual, but it sent an unexpected jolt through my chest. A part of me wanted to pull away. Another part stayed perfectly still. Then Rowan, who had been silent for most of the evening, finally spoke. His voice was soft, but laced with something sharper, a memory maybe. "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who, well, she had a way of making nights unforgettable." The room grew tighter, as if the very air thickened. Their gazes settled on me. 3 pairs of eyes, each holding a different kind of hunger. I laughed lightly, trying to steer us back to safer territory, but they didn't follow. Leo moved in again, his hand resting gently on my knee, his touch bold but not yet forceful. "You ever think about what you're missing, Elaine?" he asked, voice low, nearly coaxing. "Life's too short to live it all in routine." The words hit deeper than they should have. I opened my mouth to respond, but all I managed was a whisper, barely audible. I think I should go." Seth's laugh came like a rumble, slow and deliberate. "Go? But the night's just starting." His arm wrapped lightly around my waist, not forceful, but firm. "Stay. Let's see where this goes." The space between us was charged. That electric, dangerous kind of charge, the one that can light a fire or burn everything down. My mind flashed to Frank, to our life of quiet rituals, dinner at 6, reruns at 8, There was comfort in it. But here, in this cluttered room, surrounded by strangers and secrets, there was something else. The thrill of being noticed. Wanted. As the laughter faded, quiet took over again. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, breathless kind that follows a decision not yet made. We started talking again, more quietly now, our voices dropping into something deeper. I found myself sharing bits of my life, the ordinary, the worn, missed chances, faded dreams. They listened, really listened. The wild energy of earlier softened into something almost tender. The bottle passed from hand to hand. Warmth spread through me, not just from the alcohol, but from the unexpected intimacy. For the first time in a long while, I felt like more than someone in the background. At some point, we moved back into the storage room for more drinks. I bent to lift a crate, and before I could straighten, I sensed someone behind me. I turned and found Leo standing there, close. His eyes were locked on mine. Intense, unreadable. There was no touch, no words, just a look. But in that moment, something passed between us. Not permission exactly, not desire alone, just understanding. I stood, the crate heavy in my hands, though I barely felt its weight. Leo reached forward, his fingers brushing mine as he offered to help. "Let me," he said quietly. The softness of his voice belied the tension humming beneath it. Back with the others, the room felt different. Smaller, tighter, the air thicker. Leo sat beside me, our legs touching. The contact was immediate, heat radiating from his skin, his cologne mingling with the scent of sweat and liquor. I felt it in my chest, that tight pull of something forbidden and alive. Seth leaned back, watching us with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Looks like someone's made a friend," he said, the tease light, but his gaze sharp, too sharp. Rowan sat apart, quieter than ever. His eyes weren't on us, not really. They were lost somewhere far away, as though he were remembering something too delicate to speak aloud. I could feel Rowan's gaze on us, quiet, steady, like a silent witness to the unraveling moment. He wasn't judging, just watching, as if holding space for what was unfolding. The conversation had faded, replaced by breath and heartbeat, the kind of silence that hums with meaning. Leo's hand slid gently onto my thigh, firm but unhurried. His touch sent a ripple through my chest, sharp and electric. "Elaine," he murmured, his voice low, honeyed with whiskey and something unspoken. "You deserve more than just routine." My heart thudded in my chest, each beat echoing like a drum. The room tilted slightly, not just from the alcohol, but from the flood of emotions surging beneath my skin. There was something in Leo. His youth, his confidence, his complete disregard for boundaries, that stirred a part of me I'd long buried. But then, like a ghost in the room, Frank's face rose in my mind. The lines I knew so well, the familiar weight of his presence. A pang of guilt pressed against my chest. I'm married," I whispered. The words tasted like regret and longing mixed together. Leo didn't recoil. Instead, his fingers tightened, around mine, his eyes softening with something that wasn't pity, but understanding. "I know, Elaine," he said gently. "But tonight, it's just us. No judgments, no expectations. Just this moment." His voice was velvet, his breath warm against my ear. The air between us thickened, heavy with possibility. Seth leaned back, watching us with a sly grin that barely veiled his awareness. "Let's make this night memorable," Leo whispered, his lips close enough that they nearly brushed my skin. I knew what he meant. There was no misunderstanding. His intent. In the dim, amber-tinted light, the implications were undeniable. My thoughts scattered, the pull of the unfamiliar at war with the safety of the known. The comfort of a life well lived versus the ache of something I'd never dared touch. I looked into his eyes. In them, I saw more than desire. I saw a challenge, an invitation, a question. The room held its breath. Was this the moment? The one where everything changes? Seth broke the tension with a smirk and a wink. Maybe we should lock the door, he suggested casually, just to keep this little party private. The click of the lock was soft, barely a sound, but it echoed like thunder in my mind. Now we were sealed off from the world. No way out but through. The laughter was gone, replaced by a silence so thick it seemed to press against my skin. Glasses clinked somewhere behind me. Breath hitched. The air practically shimmered with anticipation. Leo's hand still rested on my thigh. His fingers moved slightly, tracing an invisible line that sent a tremor through my body. I looked at him. Really looked. The faint sheen of sweat on his brow, the alcohol on his breath mingling with the earthy warmth of his cologne. I was spinning, but it wasn't the liquor. It was the heat between us, the unsaid things, the thrum of danger and desire. Seth watched us with that same grin, playful, but his eyes said he understood. He saw it all. Rowan remained quiet, as always, but he wasn't distant. His silence was deliberate, the kind that comes from someone who feels too much. Leo leaned closer again, the back of his fingers brushing slowly up my thigh, gentle, deliberate, like he was writing a question only I could answer. "You deserve more than just routine," he whispered again, the words laced with both temptation and something like compassion. My heart pounded, a wild, urgent beat. The room was spinning, not from drink, but from the gravity of the choice before me. And once again, Frank flickered through my thoughts, the man who had stood beside me for 3 decades, with love that had grown quiet, but never left. The man who had never looked at me the way Leo did now. I was teetering on a razor's edge, between who I had been and who I might allow myself to be, if only for one night. The room waited. So did I. I could feel their eyes on me. Seth's smirk, a silent push, Rowan's steady silence offering quiet permission. Leo leaned in again, his lips brushing my ear, his breath warm and dangerous. "Let's make this night memorable," he whispered, each word a velvet thread wrapping itself around my resolve. I didn't need him to explain. I already knew what he meant. The implications were loud in the stillness. In that moment, my mind was a hurricane, spinning between the familiar safety of my life with Frank and the wild magnetic pull of the unknown. Leo's gaze held mine. In his eyes wasn't just desire. There was a dare, an invitation to step off the path I'd walked faithfully for decades, and into something uncharted, something reckless, something mine. The air around us thickened with anticipation. Time stretched. The silence grew almost sacred, as if the room itself was waiting to see who I would become. And then his hand moved again, this time slower, firmer, drawing me closer. The contact lit up something inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. The heat of his body, the scent of his cologne tangled with alcohol and sweat. It was dizzying, and it blurred the boundaries I had always believed were fixed. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The answer lived in the way I leaned in, the way I didn't stop him, in the soft hitch of my breath as the moment unfurled into something irreversible. The night unfolded not in clear memories, but in impressions. The brush of skin, the press of bodies, the rush of guilt tangled with exhilaration. What began as a drink shared with strangers became something far more intimate, far more complicated. And when it was over, we lay in silence. Not the tense, waiting silence of earlier, but something heavier, weighted by what we'd done and what it meant. Leo's hand still rested on my thigh, a tender echo of the night's intensity. My breath slowed, but inside I was unraveling. I felt it, a shift deep within, like something had cracked open. I had stepped out of the version of myself I'd worn for so long and into someone new, someone braver, someone reckless, someone real. But with that transformation came the chill of reality. Like cold water slipping through a crack, guilt began to seep in. Frank's face flickered through my thoughts, not angry, but still, painfully still. Leo turned to me, his earlier seduction faded, replaced by something quieter. "Elaine," he said gently, "are you okay?" I nodded, though my thoughts were a swirling mess of shame and clarity, wonder and regret. The room, once charged with possibility, now felt like a confessional. And I was both sinner and confessor. Seth, who had observed everything with a kind of amused reverence, finally broke the silence. "Well," he said with a half-smile, "that was something else." There was no mockery in his tone, only the kind of respect that comes from witnessing something deeply human. Rowan, still distant, gave the faintest nod, his gaze unreadable but somehow more present than before. There was a quiet concern in his eyes that surprised me. I sat up slowly, pulling my clothes back into place, the feel of fabric suddenly foreign against my skin, as if it belonged to another life, another version of me. The air hung thick with the scent of intimacy, sweat, skin, cologne, and remnants of spilled alcohol. It clung to the moment, sealing it in memory. Leo sat up beside me, his touch different now, less invitation, more comfort. His fingers brushed mine with a softness that made my chest ache. "You know," he said, his voice lower, steadier, "this doesn't have to change anything. It can just be a moment, a memory." But he was wrong. Everything had changed. This night wasn't just about touch or temptation. It was about choice, about stepping outside the lines I'd drawn for myself, about breaking vows, even for just a heartbeat, and discovering that the world didn't end. But I had shifted. Maybe only I would ever know. Maybe it would live inside me as a whisper, a secret, a quiet rebellion. But it would live. I looked at the three of them, Leo, Seth, Rowan, each of them now etched into this unexpected chapter of my life. Their faces were softened by the aftermath, by understanding. In their own way, each had played a role in the shift that had taken place inside me. "I need some time," I said, my voice steady, even as a storm churned beneath the surface, "to think, to process." They nodded. No pressure. Just quiet respect for what the moment had become. Seth stood, extending a hand to help me up. "We'll be here if you need us," he said, his usual playfulness replaced by something real, sincerity that sat gently in his voice. My steps felt heavier than before as I walked toward the door. Every footfall echoed, a reminder of the weight of my choices. I reached for the lock, and the soft click as it turned sounded like the closing of a chapter. Outside, the club was still. The night hadn't yet yielded to dawn. The air hit my skin like a wake-up call. Sharp. Honest. I inhaled deeply, the coolness cutting through the warmth I had just left behind. Reality returned in waves. Frank. Our life. The routines. The quiet. Love. The familiarity. And now, This. The betrayal. The shift. Everything came crashing down in a quiet, invisible avalanche. That night would follow me, not just as a memory, but as a turning point. How would I face him? How would I reconcile the woman I thought I was with the woman who had just walked out of that room? The questions came fast, heavy, without answers. I moved through the empty club slowly, each shadow familiar now. Not threatening, but bearing silent witness to my transformation. I knew I couldn't return to the way things were. Not completely. Something inside me had been awakened. A desire I'd buried. A part of myself I had silenced for too long. The decision to go with Leo, Seth, and Rowan had been mine. The consequences were mine, too. This wasn't just a night of passion. It was a night of breaking chains, of stepping outside the version of myself I'd been surviving within, even if only for a moment. As the sky began to shift toward dawn, we dressed. In silence. There was no awkwardness, just understanding that this was a moment suspended in time, not to be repeated, not to be explained. We thanked each other, a simple, quiet acknowledgement of what we had shared. Then we parted ways, leaving the storage room as though nothing had happened, though everything had. Walking home beneath the early light, I felt a kaleidoscope of emotion. Guilt, yes, for what I had done to Frank, but also something harder to name. A reclaimed self. A strange, burning sense of having remembered who I was before the world quieted me. What happened at the club would remain a secret. One locked away, perhaps forever. But it would always be there. A shift in my foundation. A whisper that would never fully fade. The streets were quiet. The city still curled in sleep. I walked with purpose, my shoes clicking softly against the pavement, each step a beat of accountability, each breath a negotiation with who I had become. The chill in the air was a sobering contrast to the heat I'd left behind. It reminded me that I was returning to reality, to the life I'd built with Frank. The routines, the safety, the quiet devotion. But now, those things carried a different weight. They were tinged with the memory of what I had dared to touch, if only briefly. Would I tell him? Could I? Could I bury this night inside me like a treasure, or would it rot slowly from within? The morning light stretched across the pavement in long golden shadows. Everything felt surreal. The night's laughter, the touches, the whispered promises. It all felt like it had happened to someone else. And yet it hadn't. It was mine. All of it, etched into my memory. When I reached home, the sight of our door brought a mixture of comfort and dread. Familiarity greeted me like a warm blanket, but it was lined with something colder now. Guilt, doubt, change. The door creaked as I stepped inside, the sound unusually loud in the stillness. The quiet house held its breath. Straight to the bathroom. Let the hot water cascade over me, hoping it could do more than clean skin. That maybe it could wash away the weight, the ache. But the steam only clouded the mirror, blurring my reflection. I stared into it anyway, wondering if I'd ever truly see the same woman again. Later, dressed and clean, I sat at the kitchen table. The silence of the house felt heavier than usual. I wrapped my hands around a mug of coffee, the warmth grounding, the ritual comforting. And yet, every sip tasted like a small betrayal. Would I tell Frank? Would Elaine speak the truth? Or would this secret remain locked inside me like the storage room, dusty, hidden but real? I didn't know yet. Part of me longed to confess, to release the weight. But another part, the one awakened by that night, wanted to keep it. Not as shame, but as something else. Something private. A flicker of rebellion against years of quiet submission. For now, I would carry it alone. But I would never be quite the same again. I knew life would go on. The days would blend, one in two. The next with the same routines, morning coffee, quiet dinners, shared silence. But something had shifted. There was a new layer to my existence now. A voice inside that had once been silent, now whispering questions I could no longer ignore. This night hadn't just been about bodies or stolen touches in the dark. It had been about choice, about stepping beyond comfort, about breaking something sacred, a vow, however briefly, and discovering a version of myself I hadn't known was still alive. As I sat at the table, the morning light creeping stronger across the floor, I felt the weight of what had changed. This wasn't just a single moment. It was a thread that would now weave itself through the fabric of all my days. A part of me had awakened, curious, craving, unapologetically aware. How would I reconcile that with the woman I had always believed myself to be? The answers didn't come easily. They hovered just out of reach, like smoke, impossible to grasp, but impossible to ignore. But one thing was certain. I had crossed a line. And no matter how carefully I walked from this point on, I could never fully return to who I had been before. Not entirely. The sun rose higher, its light stretching into every corner of the room. The day would begin. Frank would wake, and I would face him. Not just as his wife, but as someone different now. Someone with a truth tucked away in her bones. A truth that pulsed like a second heartbeat. The world would see the same Elaine. But, inside, I would always carry this night. A silent rhythm, a hidden echo, a reminder of what I had done, and what I might still do if this story moved you. Feel free to like, share, or comment. Your engagement helps us bring more stories like this to life, honest, human, and unforgettable.